Scotland, Northern Ireland and eventually into parts of northwest England and Wales. As we head into the afternoon, that rain will continue to track over into northeast England and the Midlands. The far southeast and East Anglia may stay largely dry until late in the day. 17 possible here, but generally feeling cooler with the wind and the rainfall, which across parts of Scotland, the Met Office do have yellow warnings in place. That rain will be across East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. Bear that in mind. Not great conditions on the roads before it swings away. Clear spells follow. And then into the weekend, we've got sunshine and showers on Saturday, with the showers and this westerly wind just packing into northwest England, western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers more scattered elsewhere, not many of them getting to eastern areas, generally dry and bright here. The likelihood of a bit more cloud spilling into the southwest, with some outbreaks of rain coming in here, more particularly late afternoon into the evening. Temperatures a touch higher on Saturday, but still it will be quite breezy. The wind's easing down further on Sunday, and bar 1 or 2 showers in western Scotland, most of us on Sunday should be dry and bright.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hey, welcome along. We have a jam-packed show for you. Oh, not just jam-packed, anybody can do that. Ours is thick-cut, tangy marmalade-packed. That's how good it is. Leilani Dowding is here to examine the churning waters of the Baltic and the English Channel, as only she can. Mark Morano is back for more on the Great Reset. This is the future. All the smart guys are building for you loser schlubs right now. Are you one of those people who prides themselves on following the science? Must follow the science. Must follow the science, even if it leads straight off a cliff. Well, we have a scientist you should be following. Joseph Freeman is here. And even as the crisis worsens from currency collapse to home heating bills, we happen to have some good news. It's rare, but it's happened. Toby Young is here. Just a week ago, he broke the news on this show that the totalitarian creeps of PayPal were trying to shut him down. Well, he fought the PayPal and he won. The bad news is, alas, we do not have an exclusive interview with the Lord Privy Seal, whoever that may be this week, but instead we do have lots on the stuff that matters in the hour ahead. And of course, the most important part of the show, that is you. Give it your best. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can Twitter me at gbnews. It's all coming your way after Polly Middlehurst with the latest headlines. Over to you, Polly.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor have today been defending the government's growth plan despite the criticism of their mini-budget and the ensuing chaos in the financial markets yesterday. Speaking for the first time since the tax-cutting measures were announced, the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, insisted the £45 billion package is the right plan to get the economy moving. And the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, who was with the Prime Minister in Darlington today, said the strategy will help people with their energy bills and support those struggling with the cost of living.
What we're focusing on is delivering the growth plan and making sure, with things like our energy intervention, that people right across this country are protected. And without growth, you're not going to get the public services. We're not going to generate the income and the tax revenue to pay for the public services that we want to see. And that's why the mini-budget was absolutely essential in resetting the debate around growth and focusing us on delivering much better growth outcomes for our people.
But the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has described the mini-budget as disastrous, and she's urging the government to reverse the plans now.
Financial markets are rightly very worried about the government's so-called mini-budget, a series of unfunded tax cuts. And it's not just financial markets, it's families and pensioners up and down the country who are worried sick about what this means for interest rates, what it means for their pensions. The government needs to rethink this crisis made in Downing Street, recall Parliament and reverse their budget.
An American woman accused of killing 19-year-old Harry Dunn has appeared in a UK court for the first time. The teenager was killed in a collision outside a military base in Northamptonshire in 2019. Anne Sakulas, who's charged with causing death by dangerous driving, appeared at Westminster Magistrates Court via video link. She was granted unconditional bail until the case is heard at the Old Bailey next month, and she was told she'll be required to appear in person. An 80-year-old man has been convicted of murdering his partner and their young son more than 45 years ago. William McDowell was jailed for life in Inverness with a minimum term to serve of 30 years for killing Renee and Andrew McRae in 1976. On sentencing, the judge said the murders were planned and appear to have been executions. McDowell was also found guilty of disposing of the bodies, which have never been found. In the United States, President Biden has said Hurricane Ian is feared to have caused a substantial loss of life. The hurricane, which peaked at a Category 4 storm, caused severe flooding, high winds and storm surges in Florida. President Biden spoke during a visit to the Federal Emergency Management Committee.
It made landfall yesterday, and it is still moving across the state today. This could be the deadliest hurricane in Florida's history. The numbers are still unclear, but we're hearing early reports of what may be substantial loss of life.
And detail on that substantial loss of life, of course, when we get it. There are still assessments being made. We'll keep you up to date. You are, for now, up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Polly. Absolutely terrible news and terrible scenes from Florida, if that is right. Substantial loss of life. That is very bad. The scenes of those devastated neighborhoods where whole subdivisions where not a single house is still standing. Here's a pro tip. If you're ever asked to give a speech in the demilitarized zone between South Korea and North Korea, you really have only one thing you got to remember, and that's the difference between South Korea and North Korea. South Korea are your allies. They're the good guys. North Korea are the bad guys. That's the one-man nuclear psycho state. If you can keep that distinction straight, you can do what you like in the rest of the speech. Lame golf anecdotes, a North Korean, a South Korean and an Irishman walk into a bar. So with all that in mind, I give you the alleged deputy leader of the free world.
So the United States shares a very important relationship, which is an alliance with the Republic of North Korea.
So Joe Biden has an alliance with Kim Jong-un. Did Kamala Harris misspeak? Or is it, in fact, the most plausible explanation for the madness all around us? The radiators in the lobbies and corridors of all Germany's public buildings have been turned off, and in the places where they're still permitted, such as the drafty waiting rooms of 19th century railway stations, the maximum temperature is 19 Celsius. That's 66 Fahrenheit. By the way, Brexit was passed, what is it, a couple of years back now? We should be back on Fahrenheit. Real men, even real German men, shiver in Fahrenheit. The French have gone one better. Maximum permitted temperature in public buildings is 18 Celsius, that's 64 Fahrenheit. Who's going to be the first European nation to go below 60 in public buildings? We are living in an age of punitive progressivism. You have to be colder, go hungrier, live smaller, shrunken lives in order that Western governments can achieve their public policy priority of reducing sea levels in the Maldives in the next century. After the last 3 years, do you think there's the least chance of them being able to pull that off? Do you think the purported deputy leader of the free world could find the Maldives on a map? She can't tell the difference between North Korea and South Korea when she's actually standing on the border of North and South Korea. Is this newly revealed alliance between Kamala Harris and Kim Jong-un behind the weirdest news of the week? Yesterday we discussed the 3 leaks in the Nord Stream pipeline that are filling the Baltic Sea with explosive gas. The Swedish Coast Guard now says there's a 4th leak. The biggest breach is, look at this, the biggest breach is causing toxic methane bubbles over a half-mile diameter. The Swedes, Danes, the Germans all agree this was sabotage. The 2 explosions caught by seismologists would have required either a submarine or a ship and divers to arrange. It's odd that no such craft have been detected in a world in which the French Revenue Service has drones flying over Provence to see whether you're building a swimming pool in the back garden without paying the relevant permit fees. We are deep in what the old CIA counterintelligence chief Jim Angleton knew as the wilderness of mirrors. The conventional wisdom from the respectable media is that Putin just blew up his own pipelines. Why would he do that? On the very day the Nord Stream system got blown to kingdom come, a new pipeline opened from Norway to Poland. If the Kremlin really has the urge to blow up pipelines in the Baltic, why wouldn't they blow up the Norwegian one rather than their own? Especially when the Scandinavians tell us no investigators can get near enough in those gas-filled waters to figure out whose fingerprints are on the crime. As you know, I am fiercely opposed to His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom deporting one of His Majesty's Australian subjects, Julian Assange, to the United States, where he will die very quickly in the care of the dirty, stinking, rotten, corrupt US Department of Justice. Mr. Assange is a lefty, but he has been abandoned by the new left in London and Sydney and New York, so it's left to right-wing nutters like me to put in the occasional word for him. Here's what he said about Afghanistan 11 years ago.
The goal is to use Afghanistan to wash money out of the tax bases of the United States, out of the tax bases of European countries, through Afghanistan and back into the hands of a transnational security elite. That is the goal, i.e. the goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war.
The goal is to have an endless war, not a successful war. That was Julian Assange in 2011. An endless war, not a successful war. So the United States staggered on in Afghanistan for another decade, at which point a nation that accounts for 40% of the planet's military spending contrived to lose to goat herds with fertilizer. Odd. And then barely had they scuttled out of Kabul, then a new war began, this time in Ukraine, and whether or not this will prove a successful war, it's certainly beginning to look like the usual Pentagon endless war. Leilani Dowding is with us. Leilani, yesterday we ran a poll on who was, and in fact the Americans came out a little ahead because there seems no clear reason why Putin would want to do this at all. But what do you actually make of the way this thing is staggering on after 7 months now?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because there's only two ways out of war, and that's either all-out war, nuclear war, or peace negotiations. Now, we saw from the start that Boris Johnson, he went over there, he sent money over, he immediately put sanctions on. There was no calls for peace, there was no calls for negotiation. Now, if you at the start, like I did, said, well, why are we escalating this? Why don't we try and get a negotiation? You get called a Putin sympathizer, an apologist. And, you know, I had to add a caveat to every question I asked about the Ukraine. You know, why is this happening? What was the conflict that was beforehand? What was the history in Donbass? People would immediately say, I had to have a caveat. I'm not a Putin sympathizer. I'm not an apologist. I just want to know the background. And it was very similar with COVID and the lockdowns. You've got this immediate, really highly charged, very emotive propaganda coming out. You saw the fake news that all soldiers on Snake Island were killed. They weren't. They surrendered. They were taken by Russian troops and then they were released. And they actually used video game footage on some of the very, very early reports. Now, obviously, I know that thousands of people, innocent people, have been killed. And what's happened is tragic, but there was no peace talks. There was no negotiation. There was nothing. And suddenly, Donald Trump now has come in and said he would happily broker peace. But everyone's silent. This should be the biggest news, that somebody actually wants to try and find peace in the area, and, you know, silence. And it's not going to be long until you get called an extremist for asking for peace.
Well, that's what's interesting, Leilani, here, is this urge to escalate. The United States so far, the United States so far has given $67 billion to Ukraine in 7 months. Versus the Russian entire military budget for 2021 was $66 billion. So in other words, the Americans are spending at twice the rate on Ukraine that the Russians are doing on their entire military. These are staggering sums of money. We're not being anti-American here. I know you, although you are the very epitome of an English rose, but you actually happen to have a US passport. So we're not foreigners like insulting the Americans, but this is deeply weird. $67 billion I was in Ukraine a couple of months ago. Hotels cost like €7 a night. I have no idea what you would do with $67 billion there.
Well, nor do I, and nor does anyone else, because we're not seeing any receipt. Where is the money going? Now, before 2022, there were documentaries made. Ukraine on Fire by Oliver Stone, Extreme World by Ross Kemp, or the BBC, that talked about the amount of corruption and human trafficking and money laundering going on in Ukraine. Now, you're not allowed to talk about it because that name calling starts. As soon as you mention anything about the history, the name calling starts. And we're not getting any receipts. And I think a lot of people are waking up now because, you know, and England's pledged, $5 billion? You know, we've got massive problems here. And Liz Truss's last tweet was about Ukraine. What is going on in England? The British people are, you know, they heat their homes, and we're sending money to and Ukraine. It's like, Zelensky. It's like he's expecting. It's like this entitlement that everybody should be sending all their money to him, and it's just got to the point where you're not. Sorry.
Well, except no, Leilani. I mean, what I find interesting about this business in the Baltic is they're actually expanding, however you look at it. We may never know definitively who did this, but it's clearly an escalation. And it seems that we're being softened up now for the destruction of key global infrastructure, such as gas pipelines, as the next phase in this war. I mean, whoever did it, it's clearly an escalation, isn't it?
No, it's absolutely an escalation. And it's, you know, we've got to figure out who it is. I mean, I think it's got to be USA, or it could even be, you know, NATO, because there's that new pipeline from, I think is it Poland and Norway. But we need to figure out. I really don't believe that Russia would do this, because as James Melville said yesterday, it's their brinkmanship, isn't it? It's the one thing that they could switch on and switch off and kind of control us and maybe lessen sanctions. But at this point, if we stop the gas sanctions, it's not going to make a difference because they've damaged the pipeline. But, you know, as always, I sit on the side of innocent people. You know, I'm not there to support Putin, not there to support Zelensky, but the people winning here are the globalists and the military-industrial complex. And again, like you said, there's all this money going out, and we have no idea exactly where the money's going or where the receipts are for it.
No, and if it was Putin, it means that, you know, the gloves are off, because next week he could nuke Carrickfergus. I mean, that's basically, because if it is Putin, then the world is about to go up big time. Thank you, Leilani. It's all, yeah, carry on.
Oh, no, I was going to say, this is why we need peace negotiations. Someone needs to go in and try and broker peace, because otherwise it's just going to be escalate, and then it's an all-out nuclear war. And it's fine for people to sit at home thinking it might be Iraq, where it's not going to happen, but this is going to be on our doorstep.
Yeah, it's very weird that there's no talk of peace. It's as if Neville Chamberlain, whatever it was now, almost 80 years ago, had come back from Munich with a piece of paper saying it's mega war in our time. We're escalating it. That's what we want. We want to blow up the planet. Very strange, very dangerous. We're dancing on the precipice. Thank you very much, Leilani. It's always good to see you. Coming up, we're going to get your comments, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And we're going to talk to a trio of heavyweights, Dr. Joseph Freeman, Mark Morano, and Toby Young. Don't touch that dial. You never know what horrors are lurking on some of these other channels. Believe me, you don't want to know. We're coming right back.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let us channel what the people are saying. George says, Mark, why don't the Russians just turn the gas off? Well, they've been turning the gas off. This Nord Stream thing was basically only at 20% capacity, and because of the necessary repairs. It's a bit like the way cars used to be a few decades ago. The Nord Stream pipeline was spending more time in the shop being repaired than actually running. But it was still open for 20%. So if you're a nice Hans or Fritz and you get home and you think, I'm just going to stick a bratwurst in the microwave, turn the heat off and watch something on telly, Coronation Street. Don't think they have that in Germany. It's probably Kaiser Nation Street or whatever. Then you find out, no, there's not enough power to run that because back in the Kremlin, Vlad has taken his foot off the gas pedal. That's what he's been doing, which makes the decision just to blow it up even more perplexing. Unless you're Gordon, who says, Mark, this is the way to think. If it was Russia who sabotaged the Nord Stream pipelines, it was to preempt Biden's threat to unilaterally turn off the pipelines, just to show Biden that for Vlad, just to show that he doesn't care. Yeah, so it's like go ahead, make my day, punk type thing. That's what he's doing. Maybe the Americans did it because they wanted us to think that it was the Russians doing it to prevent the Americans doing it before the Russians did it. This is the world we're in now. But the thing about this, how many bazillions would be lost if they were to do this to part of the global internet infrastructure, and they just disrupted the communications between the financial communications that the banks have between New York and London and Hong Kong for like 24 hours. How many bazillions do you think would be lost by that? Ever since we started interviewing Charlotte Wright, Vicky Spitt, all our other dear friends bereaved and injured by the COVID vaccines, and who since their appearance on this show have very belatedly received pitiful compensation checks from His Majesty's government, I've been barraged by emails from people saying, oh, well, yes, a widow here, a guy with no leg there. These are anecdotes, not science. Losing your husband actually isn't really an anecdote. But these guys all want to know, where's the hard evidence? Not on some blog post from the dark web, but in peer-reviewed journals, because people who follow the science must follow the science. Only go for peer-reviewed journals, even if peer review is actually pretty corrupted, just starting with the government of China. Anyway, the propagandist pom-pom girls like Philip Schofield, Piers Morgan, Dr. Matthew Sweet, they haven't caught up yet, but the peer-reviewed journals are catching up. Well, virtually every day. From The Lancet, one of the world's most eminent and respected journals, just last month, we learned that getting 2 doses of the vaccine increases your chance of getting the COVID by 44%. Don't believe me? Oh, that's fake news, report him to Ofcom. No, well, they bury it in the appendices, but here it is, supplementary table number 7. Let's have a look at this. See that number smack in the middle there? About halfway down, 1.44. That means if you've had the second jab 14 or more days ago, so it's over 2 weeks, over a fortnight since you got the second jab, your risk of testing positive for COVID is now up by 44%. It's not just that, as we know from Justin Trudeau and Joe Biden and even the chief exec of Pfizer, all these guys who've been quadruple and maybe quintuple vaccinated by now. It's not just that the vaccines don't prevent you from getting the COVID, but in fact, per The Lancet, they increase your chance of getting it rather considerably. Now we have another peer-reviewed paper published in the new issue of Vaccine, and written by a senior editor of the British Medical Journal, a former chief science officer at the US Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Dr. Asim Malhotra was on the show a few weeks back and gave us a preview of one of the findings.
very eminent doctors, very eminent scientists, Peter Doshi, associated with the BMJ, Robert Kaplan from Stanford, in one of their preprint publications, they were able to get access to new data from Pfizer and Moderna original trials on the vaccine. And what they found is shocking. As you said earlier, that in the trial itself, it appeared that one was more likely to suffer a serious adverse event from the vaccine, so disability, life-changing event, hospitalization, than they were to be hospitalized from COVID. And that was...
Yeah, that's pretty basic, isn't it? You're more likely to suffer a serious adverse event from the vaccine than you are to be hospitalized from COVID. One of the authors, Dr. Joseph Freeman of Louisiana State University, joins me now. And your study has basically confirmed what Dr. Malhotra was talking about there. Just to run the basic numbers, as I get it, overall, it's about a 1 in 800 chance of an adverse event from the vaccines overall. But actually, when you look at Pfizer, it's pretty close to 1 in 500. It's 0.9, I think, not to go all decimal this early in the conversation. Just tell us how serious these numbers are in vaccine terms.
Well, yeah, the rate of 1 in 800, you know, it can vary somewhat. It's just the best estimate we have given the evidence from the best evidence that we can have with randomized controlled trials. Now, as for the amount of harm, 1 in 800, if you compare this to all the other vaccines, essentially you see serious harm with them at about a rate of 1 to 2 in a million. Because our vaccine safety monitoring, whenever there's any hint of harm, that we've pulled those vaccines off the market. So you know, at least people can rest assured that when they're giving their children these the other vaccines, that those are safe. This is on a totally different level.
And what is the reason for that? Because it would appear just to a layman that evidently they've changed the standard by which they release products onto the market. There's a huge difference between 1 in 800 or that 0.9 in 500 for the Pfizer and the standard, which, as you say, is 1 or 2 adverse events in a million.
Yeah, there has not been any sort of public policy change. The FDA and the CDC do not they're not acknowledging that these harms are occurring.
So
I would also like to point
out, yeah.
I wanted to point out one thing on that harm benefit analysis. As when you opened up this story, it's a little bit more. It needs to be understood in a slightly different way. You have harm, right? This harm benefit analysis. So you have, for example, it doesn't prove that the vaccine is more harmful than it is beneficial in all people. It demonstrates more the fragility of the balance between harms and benefit. For example, if the trial went longer, if the COVID cases were higher, or if people were at a higher risk of hospitalization, it's possible that we would have seen more benefit than harm. But alternatively, it's possible if, they tested this during an Omicron-like variant with lower hospitalization, more breakthrough infections, people with a lower risk of hospitalization, or people with natural immunity, then we would see more harm. Well, we'd see decreased benefit. So it would move the equation of harm and benefit towards harm. So this is, people have a little bit misunderstood this. And I just wanted to make it clear that our analysis, it simply points out that there are different factors that would change this harm benefit analysis, and it can go in either direction.
Yeah, but you're actually talking about a harm benefit analysis. So what you're saying makes perfect sense, that you might devise a vaccine for a particularly virulent virus, and then some weak, pathetic variation comes along, and so the harm benefit analysis between the vaccine and this pathetic, harmless variant changes. But we don't hear that from the government, from the media, from the propaganda about this. What you've just said, for example, I cannot recall any Western health minister actually saying, well, the cost-benefit analysis on the vaccines has changed because we now, the main thing circulating is this harmless Omicron thing?
It seems that it's a pretty obvious take on it. If the vaccine's causing less hospitalization, then you're going to have less benefit from a vaccine. That's quite clear. I mean, I think that you're correct in that people our public officials are not speaking about this, and I really believe it's their duty to be speaking out about the findings in our study. As a physician, it's my responsibility to inform my patients of the potential harms of any intervention. It's the old ethical principle of informed consent. Now, I understand that can make people concerned that maybe it'll make people, take the vaccine less. However, my desire to want to give a beneficial treatment to a patient does not outweigh their right to be informed on an individual intervention. And it also does not, they also have the right to refuse a medical intervention. And the desire of our public health officials or of any physician they're not equal to each other. And this is a dilemma that we've answered. We universally agreed upon informed consent as a principle within modern Western medicine.
Yep. No, that's critically important. But for example, I mentioned one of our vaccine widows who's been on this show, Vicky Spitt, and she was at the coroner's inquest for the love of her life, and the medical professionals there who had attended him and been in hospital with him said that they actually had no information on any harmful effects. Anything that called into question the vaccine, they only knew about if they went Googling hither and yon, and after 3, 4, 7, 12 links, they came across something that told them there were possible side effects to the vaccine. So in other words, it's not even clear to me whether the doctors and nurses and the other people, because a lot of these jabs are not even being administered by medical professionals. In the United States, you can get them in firehouses and grade schools and all kinds of places. It's not clear to me under that system if the nice little old lady in your local fire station is in a capacity to bring you up to speed on informed consent.
Yeah, I'm not certain that most physicians are able to do it because this information is not being widely circulated by our public health agencies. So it stays kind of under the radar, and we're stuck with this situation.
Do you think your paper will change the debate on this? Or are you worried that, like the fellas who wrote the Great Barrington Declaration, that you guys will just instantly be reviled in public, and you'll be damned as anti-vaxxers and all the rest of the rubbish?
I hope not. I hope that's not the case. But it has been quite disheartening to we've tried hard to communicate with various different media and to explain the story. We thought it was important enough that more media would pick it up, and you're the first media that was, I think, reporting on this. So it's a difficult situation.
Absolutely.
We don't know. Yeah, we don't know how to bring more attention to it, and but we are trying to.
Well, you've published this paper. It's in Vaccine, which is the journal for this subject, and the bottom line takeaway is there's a 1 in 800 adverse event over all these vaccines. That's Pfizer, Moderna, all the rest of them, and that the numbers are actually even worse for individual vaccines within them. 1 in 800 versus 1 in a million for the vaccines we've been familiar with for decades.
Yes, that's exactly what we found in our study.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. We're going to come. Yeah. Carry on.
You got it. You know, we are very concerned, and we do want to bring attention to this. And it's something that people should be aware of before they are vaccinated. I'm not giving any recommendation on what people should do, but they at least should be informed about the potential for harm that our study has found.
Bingo. You can't give informed consent if you're not informed, and a physician cannot help you get to informed consent if doctors and nurses don't know anything about these adverse events either. Thank you very much, Doctor. We're going to stay on this, and we're going to have you back to get into some more of the disturbing aspects of this. We spoke yesterday about the Great Reset, which is underway and well advanced, and indeed the COVID regime is a big part of it. Mark Morano is the author of this terrific new book, The Great Reset, Global Elites and the Permanent Lockdown, and he is back with us. Mark, you know, we were talking about the requirement for vaccines differs if it's a severe virus or if it's this Omicron, which actually genetically doesn't look as if it even has anything to do with. It's just been called a variant, although in fact it might just be an entirely independent flu that's come along. But the urge to keep the COVID powers in place, because a lot of what they're doing, I mean, they wouldn't be able to tell you you can't be in your country, in the United States, you know, you can't be a US Marine if you haven't had the vaccines, and you can't work in a New York diner as a waitress if you haven't had the vaccines. All those emergency powers are what enables governments to do this to their citizens.
Yes, to answer your question directly, how did this happen? Why is this vaccine allowed to be here with all these, with a disproportionate adverse reaction? It's very simple. Emergency use authorization, emergency power in the community. You can bypass all traditional vaccine requirements and tests. They're doing this with all of the updates with children. It's all a way to just, again, it's the same way, bypass not only democracy, but traditional medical safety, because we're in an emergency here. And you could also say Donald Trump, you know, President Trump's whole idea to rush a vaccine to market. You know, I know he was a private businessman, his claim to fame and getting things done under budget, very quick. But maybe an untested vaccine on the mass population that would later be used to mandate and force people and threaten them with their jobs was the wrong thing to rush through. And that's something we have to look at, because that's not, in the future, we don't want to be like, let's ram this thing in as fast as we can.
No, because when people say, oh, ivermectin or whatever is horse dewormer, well, we at least know it doesn't kill 1 in 500 horses. You know, yes. I mean, we get, whenever you talk about this, you get all these clever clogs types on Twitter who say, well, everything kills somebody. You know, aspirin has side effects for... No, if aspirin had adverse effects for 1 in 800 aspirins had an adverse effect, they'd yank it from the market.
Yeah, you said informed consent. They're not giving you the information, and you don't have the consent. That's what they tried to take away. So that whole idea was turned on its head. Once again, the premise, and it goes back to what I said about emergency powers with COVID, with terrorism, with climate coming up. They want to bypass traditional procedures, democracy, medical safety, and this is the method in which they do it. They say we have to do this. This is an urgency because it's a public health crisis, and it becomes a permanent crisis, or in the title, I'm like the permanent lockdown.
The permanent lockdown. Yeah. Now, on Lawrence Fox's show, half an hour ago, whenever it was, he was talking about demography, and one of the strange aspects of this new age is, and nobody talks about it except for the conversation Lawrence was just having, but you see across the continent these seriously collapsing fertility rates. Then you have reports that are now acknowledged in peer-reviewed journals, particularly in terms of women's health, that the vaccines change their periods and have impacts on breast milk and all the rest of it. Just as a general proposition, they don't seem worried about that because they're not into large families.
No, if anything, it's a side benefit that they didn't promote or think about. This is a benefit to them.
who worry about overpopulation. But you not only have the women's menstrual cycles being affected, and by the way, that was considered misinformation. You would be deplatformed, canceled, taken off all social media. No one was allowed to say it. Now it's in the New York Times, the Washington Post, peer-reviewed journal. But you have women's cycles being interrupted, but you also have men's sperm counts being dropped. Not just with the virus, but even with all, I mean, not just with the vaccine, but with the boosters. So combine those two, and you're going to have lower fertility rates. Now, they claim it's a temporary effect on male fertility, but again, we don't have long-term tests to know what's temporary because this is emergency use. We don't have time. This is remember, Greta Thunberg, I want you to panic because when you panic, you do incredibly stupid, dangerous things, and you play with people's lives. But to your point, we've dealt with this before, this idea of a side effect of whatever could affect fertility. Paul Ehrlich, 1969, New York Times headline, fertility drug hinted at in our water and food supply. And it goes on to talk about in both Africa and the United States, they wanted to add a fertility agent drug that would suppress population growth and create less fertility, less reproduction. This was Paul Ehrlich. And then you have Jacques Cousteau actually saying at one point, we need to lose 350,000 people per day in order to bring the Earth's population down to a reasonable level that Earth can handle it.
Jacques Cousteau, the guy, the underwater guy, the guy who was always going around on television every day for years. And he wanted to lose 350,000 people a day.
And he also predicted the oceans would be a black goo by back in the by like 1990, and that didn't happen. So
no, but if he was talking about the Baltic,
that's right. Yeah, right now it is a black goo. You're right.
Yeah, and I haven't seen him in decades. So for all I know, he may be down there in a somewhere at the bottom of the Baltic. He may be behind all this. What's worrying is that COVID seems to have enabled all the things that elite, sophisticated people want anyway. They don't want, they say it's irresponsible to bring a child into the world. Well, I was thinking of having 5 children, but then I had a couple of the COVID shots, and now I've got a touch of, what was it they used to call it? The old brewer's droop. Well, you don't need to have like 27 pints a night now. Pfizer will do that for you. I mean, it's like, it all seems to have the effect of the world they want.
Yeah, and they openly say it. People like Naomi Klein, not Naomi Wolf, but Naomi Klein, the Canadian socialist. People get confused with names. But she's actually said, we are going to address all of these issues of inequity and essentially social justice, and as a side benefit, it will also do everything we've wanted on the progressive wish list. So whenever they propose a solution, the main effect and a lot of the collateral effects all fit in with their agenda. So this is true of the climate debate when they propose, I think it was the Berkeley City Council said climate change is going to cause we need to reduce population in order to control population. The same week, Governor Jerry Brown at the time in California said that unchecked climate change was going to kill billions of people. Now, if you need to reduce population to lessen global warming, and if you don't do anything, your billions are going to die, it seems like the problems cancel each other out. So that's one time the progressives can say, hey, we don't have to do anything. Just let the default setting go. Because if climate change is as bad as they're saying, they'll get their desired population reduction anyway.
I find it disturbing when prominent people talk breezily about reducing the population of the planet by billions. I think that's actually even Adolf Hitler, to whom everybody gets compared, he didn't actually, he did in his book slightly, but not in the same way that these people do explicitly every day of the week. They regard most of humanity as useless. Some of these Davos types have actually said that.
Yeah, Yuval Harari, the top advisor to Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, has described the AI revolution, artificial intelligence, and what's going to happen. He said, you're not going to just get people doing menial jobs. We're not going to have jobs because they'll be replaced with automation and computers and robots. So he calls them useless eaters, and he actually states very specifically that the way to deal with it is give people psychotropic drugs or addict them to video games to give them amusing things so that they won't be a burden or cause more problems for society. So, when you're dealing with population, you can't ignore what Al Gore said at a Bill Gates funded event, at a Bill Gates stage with Bill Gates next to him in 2014. He said the quiet part out loud, that's now become a cliche. He said, Africa is projected to have more population than China and India combined by the middle of the 21st century, 2050. And he said, what we need is ubiquitous fertility management in Africa. In other words, a white, wealthy, Western politician is saying there's going to be too many people of color from Africa by mid-century, and we need to manage their fertility. That sounds a little bit off, if you ask me. You talk about equity.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark. I don't want Al Gore managing my fertility. In fact, the very thought of Al Gore managing my fertility, and I'm not interested in procreating at all. It's funny how that works. Mark's book is The Great Reset. He's not in any danger of getting an invitation from Klaus Schwab or Bill Gates anytime soon. Stump the Steyn looms, and Toby Young's here, gloating after his victory over PayPal. We will gloat on with the one and only Toby in just a moment.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio,
And online,
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Last week, Toby Young came on this show to reveal to the world that PayPal, which is a de facto internet monopoly, had shut down his account and those of the two organisations he runs, the Daily Skeptic and the Free Speech Union. And our chum, Mark Dolan, also spoke to Us and Them, a children's charity subjected to the same fate. And after Toby and Mark kicked up a fuss, questions were asked in Parliament, and ministers of the Crown spoke out about it, and the totalitarian goons at PayPal didn't like the way things were headed, and they caved. They restored Toby's account, so he's here to gloat. Gloat on, Toby Young. How are you feeling about this?
Well, I'm feeling good about the fact that PayPal has restored my personal account and the accounts of the Daily Skeptic and the Free Speech Union. But of course, we're not going to rely on PayPal. I mean, I trusted them once. I'm not going to trust them again. And I've said to PayPal, look, the only circumstances in which I'll use your payment processing facilities again is if you restore the accounts of all the individuals and organizations you've cancelled for purely political reasons. And you promise never to do that again. And I don't think that's very likely, Mark. So I think the next step is to lobby for a change to the law to make it illegal for financial services companies to withhold services from customers because they don't like their politics, provided those politics are perfectly lawful.
Well, especially if they're de facto monopolies, because you're big on free speech. This is actually beyond that, because it's not like The Guardian declining to publish your column or Simon & Schuster refusing to print your book. What we're talking about here is services that are essential basically to just operating a business in the modern world. If it's PayPal, it could be Visa and MasterCard. If it's Visa and MasterCard, it could easily be the electric company turning your lights out or the water board shutting you off. I mean, it's actually spreading way beyond just a free speech issue here.
It is. I mean, what we're seeing, I think, Mark, is the emergence of a Chinese-style social credit system in the West. But instead of, the communist authorities enforcing conformity with ideological dogma, it's woke capitalist corporations. I think though this was a new low because in the past, I think we've all heard about people being cut off by companies like PayPal because they express contentious views about things like the mRNA COVID vaccines. But I think this is the first time an organization that actually defends people's right to express contentious views, to exercise their free speech, has actually been shut down. So it's a new low. If the Free Speech Union isn't safe, if it's not considered acceptable by PayPal for an organization to stand up for people's right to exercise free speech in the public square, then, nobody's safe.
That's actually a very important point, Toby. The Free Speech Union basically exists to defend people who've been cancelled, and you find them legal representation. And what these guys who already control almost everything are saying, no, you can't even have an organization philosophically dedicated to the concept of free expression.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. I think PayPal really overreached here. They can't have anticipated the huge public backlash that this totalitarian decision would have. And it wasn't just us, it was also us for them, as you said in your introduction. But there are plenty of organizations, individuals whose PayPal accounts have been closed and haven't reopened. So an example is a guy called Colin Wright, former colleague of mine on a magazine called Quillette. He's an outspoken, gender-critical person. He has a PhD in evolutionary biology, so he knows what he's talking about. He maintains that sex is binary and immutable. Who knew that would be, politically incorrect? But it is. His PayPal account was closed. When he asked PayPal why they closed his account, they said, we're not going to tell you, and if you want to know, you're going to have to subpoena us. There are countless people like that who've been shut down by PayPal, and, it's not enough for them to restore the accounts of the Free Speech Union and the Daily Skeptic. We need them to restore all those other accounts they've shut down as well, and to stop doing it.
Good for you, Toby. The lesson here, folks, is to do what Toby does when they pull this garbage. Grab your mallet and hammer the crap back down their gullets until they choke on it, because that's what he did here. Let's stump it out. David says, have you something against your North Devon viewers? Yes, I'm extremely North Devonophobic, but funnily enough, that's the one thing that Ofcom can't kick you off the air for. He says, I've been emailing you for over a year without success. Well, now you've gotten through. He wants a ticket to the Christmas office party with Ava, Natalie, Alexandra, Leilani, and all those other fabulous women. I'm the hottest person on this show. Ava and Leilani got nothing on me. That'll do it. Mark Dolan is here for Dan Wootton to thump your Thursday. What you got, Mark?
Hey, Mark, another great show. At 9 o'clock, we'll be asking, can Liz Truss ride out the economic and political storm? That's the topic of my daily digest. In just a few minutes' time, I'm backing her all the way. I see this mini budget as a problem of communication, not policy. But of course, the media are attacking Britain at every turn. But I got bad news for them. The economic news is going the other way, and the pound has recovered. Lots more to come. We're live at 9.
OK, that is actually great to know. He's batting, what does they say in America? He's batting 1,000. Don't even know what that means. It's all coming up with Mark Dolan after the weather. Stay safe, stay free.
Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. Friday couldn't be any more autumnal if it tried. A chilly start with a few fog patches and then things turning wet and windy as an area of low pressure developing out in the Atlantic at the moment comes swinging our way. Ahead of that, we've got a couple of weather fronts still providing one or two showers around through this evening, but they are fading away, drifting away to the south, and most places will be dry through this evening with lengthy clear spells across England and Wales. But clouding over across Scotland and Northern Ireland as those weather fronts approach and the winds pick up here too. That'll help to keep the temperatures up across the far northwest, but for England and Wales it will be a bit of a chilly night, and we are going to see that mist and fog forming as well, which could still be around for Friday morning's rush hour, but it should tend to clear and then bright spells for a time over central and eastern England. But here comes the rain, wet and windy weather swinging across Scotland, Northern Ireland and eventually into parts of northwest England and Wales. As we head into the afternoon, that rain will continue to track over into northeast England and the Midlands. The far southeast and East Anglia may stay largely dry until late in the day. 17 possible here, but generally feeling cooler with the wind and the rainfall, which across parts of Scotland, the Met Office do have yellow warnings in place. That rain will be across East Anglia and the southeast during Friday evening. Bear that in mind. Not great conditions on the roads before it swings away. Clear spells follow. And then into the weekend, we've got sunshine and showers on Saturday, with the showers and this westerly wind just packing into northwest England, western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Showers more scattered elsewhere, not many of them getting to eastern areas, generally dry and bright here. The likelihood of a bit more cloud spilling into the southwest with some outbreaks of rain coming in here, more particularly late afternoon into the evening. Temperatures a touch higher on Saturday, but still it will be quite breezy. The wind's easing down further on Sunday, and bar one or two showers in western Scotland, most of us on Sunday should be dry and bright.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news.